listening to 91 Reasons, a journey into the twisted landscape of pop culture. Keep your hands and arms inside the podcast at all times. And now, the voice, Jeff Tucker.
All right, another episode, 91 Reasons. Welcome back. Hope this is not too loud. You may have to adjust the volume. I know that out of all the things that have been moving around on the episode, the volume has got to be the one that's been the most varied, because I am not a sound engineer. I'm a guy who talks. I usually talk into a microphone handed to me by somebody who said, we took care of this for you. So bear with me if you have to adjust the volume, because as I'm looking at it now, at the little doohickeys, you know, the doot, doot, looks like doot, doot, when somebody's going to flatline. Only it's not flatlining. It's going up and down at a giant rate, because I'm recording at a higher volume than I normally do. I don't know. It could be the fact that I'm finally using the microphone and the windscreen properly, and what an amazing concept that is, right? An amazing concept, using things properly. We're going to do things a little differently today. What I mean by that is, usually when I sit down to do an episode, I'm very honest in that I don't take a lot of notes, or usually zero notes, or anything like that. But for this episode, I'm actually going to have IMDb up on the screen, only because the topic that I'm talking about is vast. And what I mean by vast is, other than it's a lot. You know, this guy is so prolific. I grew up in the 80s. I actually was born in the 70s. And by the time the 80s rolled around, I finally became a teenager. 1984, I turned 13. And so from 13, to 20, 7 years was all in the 80s, 84 to 91. Is that the math? 91, I was 20? Yes. Yes, the judges say yes. Judges say close enough. Thank you, Family Ties. That's right. So the 80s is where I grew up. The 80s is where I lived, I grew up in a time when, and gosh, does this make me sound old or what? There were two area codes where I lived. In Los Angeles, Orange County area, there was 213 and 714. 213 was where we lived. 714 was for Orange County. My phone number growing up was 863-3621. We had the same number all those years, one phone in the house. That's it. My sister was on the phone as a teenager, obviously. You know what my mother did? My mother, when my sister became a teenager, she actually got a replica of a phone like you'd see on Little House on the Prairie, where the kind, you pull the handle off the thing and hold it to your ear, and there's a big squawk thing coming out, and you crank it. Klondike 5, how may I direct your call? She got one of those. It was a replica, so the whole front opened, and it had a no joke, it had a dial in it. All the phones had dials. I didn't grow up with a touch-tone phone ever. Not until I was in my 20s did I get a touch-tone phone. And it was funny, in 2003, 2004, I actually bought a dial phone at the swap meet. And I plugged it in to use, because there's something very pleasant about just the bell ringing. And not a fake bell that sounds the same every time, but a real bell with a metal thing that clacks in between and rings. The phone rings, The phone doesn't beep. The phone rings. And that was very comforting for a while, But I grew up in the 80s, And I'll tell you, I know that every generation says this, but we have actual proof now that the 80s, as far as movies were concerned, were the greatest decade. It was the greatest decade. And why do I say that? Because they're remaking every single movie from the 80s. If there's a movie that came out in the 80s, they're thinking about remaking it. And I'm not joking. I'm going to do an episode, and I know I say this every episode. I'm going to do an episode, but I really am going to do an episode where I have a complete list of all the movies that were released in the 80s and all the remakes that have been released, and we're going to see what's left. What's left. And remake also counts for crappy sequel. Thank you, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Have we not learned that you can't go home again? They're talking about Ghostbusters 3, an all-female Ghostbusters 3. We got to learn a lesson some point, folks. Those movies are great because they're a product of their time. You can't recapture that. How many? Name one. Has there been one or two that have come out, sequel, remake, that have been like, wow, that was worth doing? Total Recall? No. RoboCop? Hell no. Crystal Skull? Absolutely no. The prequels? No. Some things are better left in the past. And 80s movies are left in the past. I'm sure somebody's going to come along and they're going to make an awesome 80s remake. Or someone's going to point it out to me on Facebook that there's an awesome 80s remake that I'm missing. And you know what? There's always an exception to the rule. Always an exception. But in this case, I can't think of one. I can't think of a time where we had a movie franchise come back that we were just so excited and it turned out to be great. Does Batman count? Does Batman Begins count as like washing away? It doesn't, because Batman stayed alive in the 90s. In the 90s, they killed it. But even if there are good movies that have come out of remaking or sequelizing movies that came out in the 80s, the bad ones totally outweigh the good ones and should be a cautionary tale for anybody attempting that kind of nonsense. Especially when you look at some of the more bizarre films that they've remade. And there's a weird trend, like they remade Can't Buy Me Love as Love Don't Cost a Thing. And they remade About Last Night. And they remade them with all black actor cast. Like, what is it? Just write new stories. You can tell any story in the world. Like, no, we want to tell that exact story. Really? That story's already been told. Come up with a new story. Get your own stuff. I mean, I'm talking about that to any producer that's looking to option some beloved movie. Look at Tron Legacy. Boy, talk about being taken in by a flashy trailer. You know, God, we all hoped and prayed that Tron movie was going to be amazing. And, you know, the light cycle sequence was. But it was amazing because it was in the middle of the movie. And everybody in the audience was like, if this is the middle, I can't wait to see the end. And then at the end, there's nothing. Tron Legacy is a terrible movie. In the first Tron, they set up the whole world. You know everything. And if you watch it today, now that everybody knows about computers, the whole movie makes somewhat sense. And how the programs are drinking the liquid energy. In Tron Legacy, they sit down to eat like roast pig. Well, where did that come from? Farmville? So ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. So what I'm saying is that the decade that I grew up in, all the classic movies came out of. And nobody was more responsible for those classic movies than John Hughes, single-handedly. You know, I like to say that Back to the Future was the movie that inspired me to want to be in entertainment and to want to be a writer, because the script is fantastic, the movie is fantastic. But it's just one movie, and we wouldn't get the second one till 89, 4 years later. But John Hughes was a guy who was constantly working and constantly doing things that created pop culture. He wasn't just echoing it in his films. He was aggressively creating pop culture moments. I can remember, now I didn't catch on to John Hughes movies for a few years because I was too young. I wasn't teen enough to convince my mom to take me to an R-rated movie. And a lot of these movies were R-rated because they featured content that wasn't for children, or they were released before PG-13. So I didn't get to see these in the theater, but I can remember, again, going to Video Depot in Norwalk Square and renting 16 Candles. Because everybody said, you got to see this movie, man. This is the funniest movie you've ever seen. And enough people were calling me Farmer Ted that I figured, well, I should check this out. And 16 Candles, written and directed by John Hughes, is so good and so amazing because it's not high concept. You know, he would later in his career write high concept movies, but early he was really looking at an untapped voice, and that was the relevant 80s teen voice. And it began in 16 Candles when Samantha Baker's parents forget her birthday. whether you were a boy or a girl in the 80s, it just echoed that feeling of loneliness, desolation. There's nobody understands me, and there's no better way of showcasing that than forgetting my 16th birthday, because everybody's brought up to believe that the 16th birthday's got to be this big mega party, this big thing where you get a car, and it's even in the movie, you know, a big black car with a pink bow, or a black guy with the whole thing, right? A pink car with a black bow. And when they forget her birthday, you completely you identify her with her immediately. And Molly Ringwald in the first few moments of 16 Candles, when she looks at the camera and says, "I can't believe it, they effing forgot my birthday," she became a star. And not only did she become a star, but Molly Ringwald became the proxy hero template for every teenage girl in the 1980s. And that would become solidified. Baker is sympathetic. We like her immediately. And the movie, more than a lot of other movies, really showcased in a snapshot what life was like at that moment. You can watch it, and it's like it's the visual equivalent of a tangible time capsule. Everything is right there. And at the time, other than maybe Fast Times at Ridgemont High, there was no more quoted film than 16 Candles. Everybody walked around. "Oh, me long duck dong. Oh, the donger need food. No more Yankee the Winky. The donger need food," right? Everybody quoted 16 Candles. They effing forgot my birthday. "Helen, we've got an owl out here in the hallway." It's a perfect movie. And it not only is it perfect in showcasing the longing and the need of every 16-year-old girl finally hooks up with Jake Ryan, and they look at each other across that lit birthday cake, and the lighting is perfect, the music is perfect, and I think he says, "Make a wish," and she goes, "It already came true." I mean, that's good writing. Now, that writing is so good, no real boyfriend can live up to the standards set by Jake Ryan in 16 Candles. So it has the teenage girl thing down pat covered, right? But even more than that, God, the Anthony Michael Hall character, the geek, Farmer Ted, like we all just, anybody who was a geek, and all my friends were, and I was king of the geeks, that was the template. This guy was a nerd. He stood against the wall at the dance, or that one kid who does, his parents are at the dance, right? That's a generation captured right there, you know? Although Farmer Ted is a little cooler than a lot of geeks. Him managing to get Samantha to borrow her underwear for that showcase in the bathroom. None of us could have pulled that off at Norwalk High. You know, I didn't have that kind of clout to get a girl to give me her underwear, so that wasn't in the cards. But we all had those antisocial friends, you know. And I think John Cusack is one of the two that he gets to take the picture at the end. And 16 Candles is just, it's a perfect movie, and it came out at just the right time where you could go to the theater if you could and see this really amazing, what felt like a guy who, and I'm speaking about John Hughes, who had arrived. He had shown that he was here to stay in the 80s. This was a guy with a voice. It was difficult to come up with a voice, you know. Any writers had this problem. Hughes in 16 Candles, even though it's not his first movie, this is the film that said, here's the guy. Okay? And in a departure from what I normally do on 91 Reasons, I've actually got John Hughes' IMDb page up because I don't want to miss any of his movies. And I know that because the guy was so prolific and so varied, it's weird because you go, well, George Lucas did this, and this, and they all sort of stream together. American Graffiti, you know, he did the polished rewrite on Apocalypse Now, and then Star Wars, Empire, Jedi, blah, 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 right? They all meld into each other. But Hughes was all over the place. And as a writer, he was constantly either forcing himself to grow or challenging himself with a new genre. And more importantly, as a filmmaker, taking risks. If you look at his early stuff, the first big one is Mr. Mom. Now, Mr. Mom's a great movie, and Mr. Mom came out, and again, I watched this movie on video. I was too young to go see Mr. Mom in the theater, even though it was very funny when Michael Keaton holds the baby up to the air dryer in the bathroom to dry his butt off. I mean, can you imagine showing that on TV today? You'd get arrested. But back then, that was the ad. Heck, it might have even been one of the posters. Mr. Mom's a great movie where the roles are reversed. Terry Garr goes back to work. Michael Keaton has to stay home. I'm sure if I watched it now, I watched it about 5 or 6 years ago, and I enjoyed it. It's not on my list of any great movie by stretch, but the movie that Hughes wrote after that put him on the map as a writer, and not as the voice of the 80s generation, but simply as here's a guy who knows how to craft a funny story and make it real, and that's National Lampoon's Vacation, which is a classic above all classics. I mean, Vacation is my favorite theme park themed movie of all time. Gosh, Vacation is so good. And the first time I saw Vacation was actually on TV. I taped it off to TV on my Betamax and watched it a lot. So you can imagine my surprise when I finally got it on a real VHS that there were a lot of scenes put back in. Oh my gosh, the TV version of Vacation is edited to all get out. So don't ever watch that if you can help it. Always go for an uncut version. But Vacation's fantastic, and it only gets better with age, because as I get older and my kids get older, I appreciate it in different ways. Vacation's one of those movies that as a kid you enjoy it literally from the back seat of the car, because you have the kid point of view. You always get taken on vacations, and as you get older, you move to the front seat and you look back and you can see your kids back there, and you're taking them on the vacation. But it just gets better. And what a movie where it shows I'm going to use this word like I use it in 16 Candles, the longing of the married man who doesn't feel appreciated by his family. And everybody, I'm that guy as far as everybody goes to sleep and I'm stuck driving everybody home like a chauffeur. So when he looks over and sees Christy Brinkley in that convertible, like it's straight out of American Graffiti when Kurt looks over and sees the girl in the T-Bird of that's the unattainable. That's the dream girl. And she's perfect as long as you never make a connection for real with her. She will stay real and perfect as long as you leave her alone. Because the minute she starts talking, it all shatters. And the biggest cinematic example of that is The Woman in Red with Gene Wilder, where when he finally gets to Kelly LeBrock, it's not anything like he thought it was going to be. But Vacation, again, has so many quotable lines, and even unquotable lines, like the moment when they get to the Grand Canyon and he's trying to get them into the car to get out. So he sort of bobs his head and they get in and go, and sorry, folks, park's closed. Moose out front, should have told you. Or when Beverly D'Angelo says that, oh, the dog went on the picnic basket, and Imogene Coca just shrugs and keeps eating. We've all known that relative. I mean, doesn't everybody have an Aunt Edna? I've got 3 or 4. We all have an Aunt Edna. We have an Aunt Edna that used to wrap up used Avon bottles from her house and give it to us for Christmas. That's our Aunt Edna. And she's encapsulated in Imogene Coca eating that dog urine stained sandwich. Oh, it's so funny. When Clark rings the bell and Brian Dole Murray just sort of takes it away from him and then charges him an arm and a leg for a cabin. Every scene is golden. What about the graphics when he maps the trip out on their Atari 7200 or whatever it is, and they're eating the truckster with Pac-Man? Fantastic movie. Eugene Levy, if you're thinking of taking the Tribe cross country, this is the car. You didn't order the Metallic P? Metallic P! It's Metallic P! And the Griswold station wagon takes its honored place in movie vehicles so well that you can't see a wood-paneled station wagon on the street without immediately going, oh my God, it's the Griswolds. They're here. And since I'm always driving to a theme park to go to work, when I see one, I'm like, they really are on the way to the park. I think Six Flags even has one out front at some of their parks to take a picture in. Isn't that cool? But that's what announced John Hughes. And you know what? Most of us who grew up in the 80s didn't even find out he wrote that movie till 5 or 6 years later. And you're like, wait a minute. John Hughes, the guy who wrote all those great teen movies, wrote Vacation? Wait, he wrote Vacation? And Anthony Michael Hall, who played the geek in all those movies, that's Rusty? Oh, wait a minute. And you go, oh, yeah. And it was directed by Egon. Oh, get out of here. It was? Egon? Well, no wonder it's so good. Everybody involved's a genius. God, don't you love it when he launches that truck through the air in the desert? God, that is so funny. What a great movie. What a movie that just it just captures the family vacation. And they've been chasing it ever since. Robin Williams, God rest his soul, RV. Didn't Dave Foley do one with Leah Thompson? Everybody wants to capture the family going on vacation movie. And it's weird to think that in 1983, they captured it. It's been done. There's no need to go back to that well. Now, I know they just started filming a new vacation in Atlanta. Ed Helms from The Office and The Hangover is taking over as Rusty, and he's taking his family out. But Chevy Chase and Beverly D'Angelo are going to make a cameo. And we're keeping up the tradition of changing out Rusties every single movie. So I'm okay with that. And you know what? Ed Helms is a pretty good choice. He's a funny guy. He's shown in those Hangover movies that he will do anything to get the laugh. My only hope, and you heard my rant at the beginning. Now, Vacation's a little different because, again, they've kept the franchise going. The last one was Vegas Vacation, I think, in 97. But let's just hope it's not filthy. You know, it doesn't have to have full male frontal nudity to be funny. It doesn't need all that. It should be about the family dynamic and how you band together, even in the craziest circumstances, because that's what family does, and that's what that movie should be. And if Jonathan Goldstein, who's directing it, if you're listening, please don't screw up Vacation by making it dirty. They added nudity in European Vacation for like 1 or 2 shots, right? And it doesn't make the movie any funnier. Get you that R rating, maybe that's what you're going for. But it doesn't have to be dirty to be funny. It can just be funny. Vacation's funny because we love the characters. We love the circumstance. We love the absolute disappointment of the park being closed when they get there. God, if that doesn't just sum up everything you do in life, right? You build it up, and when it arrives, it's not nearly as exciting as you thought it would be. And you know, they tested the first version of Vacation. They don't even get in the park. When they find out it's closed, they go to Wally's house, and Roy Wally's house, and kidnap him and like do things. I'd love to see that version. I don't know if it's ever been released on a special edition or anything, but that's not. The test audience was like, wait a minute. We're not going to sit here for 2 hours and them not get to the park. And this was a case where listening to the test audience has made the movie great. Because you add John Candy, you go on the rides, and he shoots him with the BB gun. It's fantastic. Fantastic, classic movie. Thank you, Mr. Hughes. We can say thank you, Mr. Hughes, a lot in this podcast. Because, again, John Hughes, he defined the 80s with his writing, with his directing, with his sense of humor, with his slang. This is the guy that invented a lot of teen slang. Nobody I know was saying you're a Nero Maxi Zoom dweeby before Breakfast Club. Breakfast Club, 1985. Now, you want to talk about a movie that changed everything. If you're going to look at the John Hughes film library, all his credits, this is the movie. And he didn't peak with it because he had great movies after it, but he got it flawless this time. Breakfast Club is in the top 5 80s movies. It gets everything right. It's a play done as a movie. You got the characters, all the archetypes who show up for detention on a Saturday, and they're forced to talk to each other and forced to air their differences out and forced to find that maybe they're not so different after all. And everybody's got hopes and dreams and weaknesses and failures and fears. And everybody comes out of Breakfast Club changed, including the audience. Now, I can remember being at this guy Chris's house and seeing a commercial for Breakfast Club. And I went nuts because I thought it was a direct sequel to 16 Candles. I thought it was the Geek and Samantha Baker as seniors finally. And you know what? Maybe it is a little bit. Maybe it started out. I don't know the whole minutia history of Breakfast Club. And again, that's not what this podcast is for. But I can remember seeing that trailer and being immediately interested because of, from the writer-director of 16 Candles, The Breakfast Club, I'm hooked. And by the time Breakfast Club rolled around in theaters, and even more importantly, by the time I got on home video, I was a drama school junkie. I went to school because drama was there. And we did every possible scene from 16 Candles as a play that we wanted to. And the teacher was okay with it because it showed commitment. It showed dedication to craft because we wanted to be just as good as the people in that movie. And you know what? Everybody in that movie is flawless. There isn't a bad performance in the bunch. Everybody gets it right. And you can even see John Hughes in a cameo as the nerd's father at the beginning, who, at the end. I think his mother drops him off and tells him to study, and then his dad picks him up at the end. But we knew every nuance. And out of all the John Hughes movies, Long Duck Dong aside, John Bender's dialogue is the most quoted from my high school life. Everybody knew every line of dialogue that came out of John Bender's mouth. Any questions? Yeah. Does Barry Manilow know that you raid his wardrobe? I'll give you the answer to that, Mr. Bender, next Saturday. Everybody knew it. Everybody dreamed of detention being like that. And Breakfast Club defines the decade. It has all the archetypes. It has all the problems and the somewhat solutions to them of what's going to happen Monday. And didn't we all walk out of that theater dreaming that Monday morning the Breakfast Club got together in the hallways of the school and showed everybody else that you could change, that you could be tolerant, that you could get out of your clique and be a better person. God, I love Breakfast Club. We just watched Breakfast Club about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it's timeless. If because if you were in detention today, they would take away your cell phones, so you wouldn't have the cell phone. You might have a laptop, but other than that, Breakfast Club is just as relevant today as it was in 1985. And this is the movie that just set everybody. It's a crime that Judd Nelson didn't get a giant mega career out of what he did in Breakfast Club. I know he had shots. He played a serial killer. He was in From the Hip, where he was a lawyer. Relentless? Was that the serial killer movie? But he just sort of, he couldn't make it work, In fact, most of the actors in Breakfast Club flared brightly and then faded a little, They've come back recently. Molly Ringwald's on TV. I know that Emilio Estevez lived out his dream and directed the movie about Bobby Kennedy. And everybody, Anthony Michael Hall, would you have thought he'd have the biggest career out of there? He buffed up and he He's in The Dark Knight, for goodness sake. He's really had a TV show, The Dead Zone. But back in 1985, The Breakfast Club was it, man. You brought us here on a Saturday. You told us to write who we think we are in the simplest terms. We are, you know it. If you're listening, you know it. I don't have to repeat it because it's ingrained. And that final shot of John Bender putting his fist in the air and proclaiming victory over all the nonsense that high school and life has thrown him. Who didn't want to put your fist in the air and, God, I wish I'd seen Breakfast Club in a theater. If they ever put it in a re-release, I'll be there. All that great music. And that's the other thing I haven't even talked about. In both 16 Candles and Breakfast Club, John Hughes nailed the music scene. Which is weird because there are versions where the music has changed because maybe they didn't get the rights. Or they didn't get the rights. That's a fact. So they had to change it. Because, the same year that Breakfast Club came out, he had 2 other movies that he wrote. And he directed Weird Science. So Breakfast Club comes out, Weird Science, and European Vacation all in the same year. That's a heck of an output. And I know that he wrote Weird Science over a weekend. And out of all of the movies that I've talked about, it is the slightest, Doesn't stop me from absolutely loving it just because it's part of that scene, And Weird Science, Breakfast Club appealed to me because it was real, because this is what life is for me. I never got detention. Sorry. It's nerd alert. I never got detention. I was too good a student to get detention. But I identified with Brian in Breakfast Club. But Weird Science appealed to the genre lover in me of the sci-fi. And here's a goofy, fun sci-fi romp with special effects and creatures and lightning, and Weird Science is a really cool movie. I don't know if it's a classic that you can put right next to 16 Candles or Breakfast Club, but it's still John Hughes. So even if it's not as good, it's still great, and it's still 10 times better than some of the other crap that we endured in the 80s. There was a lot of sludge to go through. All the good ones remain, but gosh, if you look at what actually came out and all the movies that were released, you'd find a lot of junk that made it to home video and then rotted on the shelf because nobody was renting it. But there was no problem with this. Now, Weird Science has my favorite credit sequence of all time, and that's the lightning. The song kicks in, she's alive, and then the lightning hits. And it's just very striking, very striking. And Oingo Boingo's theme song is perfect, written for the film, captures the movie perfectly. And it stars, again, Anthony Michael Hall as our surrogate proxy nerd who can't get a break, gets pants in the first 30 seconds of the movie. Yo, check us out. And who does the pantsing? Robert Downey Jr., who, before he became Iron Man, made a really niche career out of the goofy, sometimes mean sidekick, Same part in Less Than Zero and Back to School and Johnny Be Good. Is that it? Yeah, Johnny Be Good, the football movie with Anthony Michael Hall. But in Weird Science, he's despicable. When they dump the icy on Gary and Wyatt, does it look like there's 10 gallons of icy in that little cup? But it's okay, because this movie's not real. This movie's not real in any way, shape, or form. It's absurd. But it's absurd in a really fun way with a lot of great performances. And Bill Paxton, notice I didn't say Pullman. Real movie fans know the difference between Paxton and Pullman. Thank you. Bill Pullman is Lone Star, and Bill Paxton is, it's my brother Chet. You stewed, but what? I'm telling Mom and Dad everything. I'm even considering making up. I mean, who didn't love Chet in Weird Science? I'm not a moron, Were those my grandparents? Hi, Nanny. Hi, Grampy. Great. Again, it has the hallmark of a John Hughes movie in that it has the most quotable dialogue and stuff you just throw out. How many times did I walk into somebody's house and go, Wyatt, your kitchen is blue? Makes no sense. Just to me. Just to me. Features a really stupid computer hacking sequence that the movies have never portrayed right. It's such a waste of time, the hacking sequence. But at least it's fun. It's fun, right? But Weird Science is great. It's weird because I was never really a fan of Kelly LeBrock. Like I said, she was great in Woman in Red, and Weird Science really solidified her. But after that, she started doing the Steven Seagal movies, because didn't she marry him for like 10 seconds? But, not really ever a Kelly LeBrock fan. If I was going to conjure up a woman out of the computer, it wouldn't look like Kelly LeBrock. But that's just a taste thing, right? But God, aren't Gary's parents the greatest? When she wipes his memory and the guy can't remember Gary at all. This is your son, Gary. I don't know what you're talking about, Lucy, but I want you to shut up. Gary! What a great movie. What a fun... if Breakfast Club is the weighty, issue-laden movie, Weird Science is the after-dinner mint. And there's nothing wrong with that, because it doesn't aspire to be anything but that. Now, I knew Weird Science again from home video, and it's weird because when Lisa gets on the escalator at the mall, it started playing the Weird Science theme again. So you imagine my surprise when I finally saw a restored version where it's actually Pretty Woman by Van Halen, and it sets the scene so much better. Oh my God, so much better. But what a really fun movie. And you get to see the guys from The Hills Have Eyes and Vernon Wells from Road Warrior. What a fantastic cameo. How come two unpopular dicks like you is having a party? It's not really a party. It's more like a get-together. Just a few friends. Great movie. And it does have the ultimate God in the Machine ending where all their problems are wiped away with a wave of Lisa's magic wand. But that's okay. That's okay, because the whole movie's like that. It's not like a regular movie where when you do that, you're like, wait a minute. There's no consequences, but it's Weird Science. The consequences are that Gary and Wyatt became better people and got girls because Gary and Wyatt were able to have confidence in themselves. They got the girls they wanted that they saw at the beginning. It's the ultimate adolescent teen fantasy fulfillment. Make the beautiful girl. Okay, how weird is that? They make the girl. It's Gary's idea. They end up in the shower with her with their pants on. But she does the gymnastics routine for Wyatt. Gary never has a moment with Lisa alone, even though it was his idea. And how strange is it that at the end they don't get Lisa. Lisa goes off on her own to become a teacher at the school. That's interesting. That's an interesting dynamic, because if they made it to God, imagine if they made it today, the awful CGI effects that would be in it, and one of them would have to marry her at the end. Gary and Wyatt would like flip a coin for her or something stupid. I know that they had a TV show on USA Network, but I never saw it. I don't know what that is. Whether it was good or bad, I have no idea, because I don't need to see a TV watered down version of Weird Science with two guys pretending to be Gary and Wyatt. I have no desire for that. The other film that, like I said, Hughes came out in 1985 was he wrote European Vacation. And some would probably say Vegas Vacation is the weakest because it has a completely different dynamic than the other movies. But I'm not really a fan of European Vacation. It has its moments, but it's not a very good movie. And I think the problem is that Audrey and Rusty are just completely miscast. I think it was not Dana Barrett. That's the girl that's Ghostbusters. But I think her name was Dana, and I think she passed away, which is very sad. But Jason Lively and her are completely miscast as the Griswold children. And I know that Hughes at one point tried to distance himself from anything he had written on European Vacation, and it shows. It's a weird movie. It has a weird aesthetic to it. It just doesn't recapture any of the magic of the original Vacation. This was one of those movies that I got from multi-video, and I watched it a lot, which is weird because I never really enjoyed it. It has scenes that are just that are not fun to watch. The scene where Audrey's eating all the German food and sausages, and like it's just really gross. There's a moment where she's eating and she stops to take a breath, and you're just like, it's too real to be funny and not goofy enough to be. I mean, there's no comedy there. It just feels uncomfortable. Maybe that's what the whole movie is. It's just uncomfortable. The only bright spot is Eric Idle. He gets beat up again and again and again by the Griswolds, but the rest of it's just not very good. I wouldn't even recommend watching it unless you get it free in a box set and you have no option. But like, hey, it might as well watch it. It came with the movie set, Now the next year, or the next big year that John Hughes had, 86, there were interesting movies that came out, because it's weird to think that, again, a guy that's so prolific and he's working both ends of the spectrum. And what I mean by that is I loved Ferris Bueller. I saw Ferris Bueller 3 or 4 times in the theater. I saw Ferris Bueller on a blind sneak preview, like where you sign up and you get to see the movie before anybody else. And they gave us buttons that said Ferris Bueller Leisure Rules. And I wore it proudly to school. And I'll never forget a guy in math class saying, so what are they? I said, so what are what? What are the leisure rules? I said, what are the leisure? No, leisure rules. Like it rules. Oh. It's funny because a few weeks later, everybody would go see Ferris Bueller's Day Off and know exactly what I'm talking about. But in the same year that he did Ferris Bueller, he also had Pretty in Pink. And Pretty in Pink is really a movie written for girls. I've watched Pretty in Pink. I enjoy Pretty in Pink, but I don't like Pretty in Pink the way my wife does. It doesn't have the same, oh my God, Ducky Dale feeling to it. I watch it and I get upset because Ducky doesn't get the girl. Sure, he gets Christy Swanson at the end, but that's so obviously tacked on as to be a joke. Because here's the thing. I'm going to talk about Pretty in Pink, and I won't go as in depth as I can on Ferris Bueller because I just don't know the movie very well because it's not one of my favorites. But what I've seen of it, I know that Molly Ringwald plays a girl who is into fashion. She's from the wrong side of the tracks, and she's in love with a rich boy, and played by Andrew McCarthy. Oh, Andrew McCarthy. I can't think of a single movie that I enjoyed Andrew McCarthy, and he always played the same goofy, good-looking. Maybe the one time he played against type in Weekend at Bernie's, I liked him, but I just don't dig him in this. And isn't it funny that James Spader is his best friend? And God, the career that Spader has had recently, like he's gonna, not only is he on The Blacklist, a huge TV show with a huge presence at Comic-Con, but he's also Ultron in the new Avengers movie. Like that's a big deal. And there he is all smart. It's me, I'm James Spader. You're not really gonna date that chick who's got no money, dude, right? James Spader, man, everyone's oily guy. Although I really enjoyed him in Secretary, a film that nobody's heard of with Maggie Gyllenhaal. But Pretty in Pink just doesn't appeal to me because I didn't have any of the experiences that are in the movie. The high school experience I had was that the girls controlled everything. The guys were not in control. If a girl picked you, you went on a date. You had to muster up the courage and ask her and pray to God that she said yes. The idea that some girl was pining for a guy just was not in my galaxy. There were girls who pined for me in high school, but as King of the Nerds, you can imagine the kind of girls that I attracted. They were not they were not Molly Ringwald, let's put it that way. And those of you who are listening who went to high school with me know exactly who I'm talking about. there were 3 of them who all hung together as a group and tried to get me to go on a date with every one of them. But it wasn't my thing. My experience was that you longed for a girl and maybe you got a date. You know, there was no Molly Ringwald glancing at me from her locker. Oh, I hope he goes out with me and blah blah blah. Whatever. You know, I'm not Jake Ryan. I'm the Farmer Ted. I think I made that clear earlier. So Pretty in Pink doesn't appeal to me because of that, and also because it's so obvious that Ducky loves her. Like, he's so into her, and he's into her not because he just wants to get in her pants, but because he knows who she is, and he loves her for who she is. He sits and listens to all of her crazy talks and helps her with her homework and does all those things that squarely put him in the friend zone. And he's never going to be a romantic interest to her. And isn't that sad? Isn't that sad that every woman who watches it now is like, God, if only we could rewrite it so she could see that this other guy who lets his friends influence him is not worth her time. And the guy right there that you friend zoned with the style and the panache and he's going to lip sync to a song because he has no embarrassment about being himself around you, and you don't want him. And they throw him a bone at the end. You know what? They should rewrite Pretty in Pink, use computer generated characters and put them together the way they're supposed to be. Because I got enough rejection and awfulness in real life. I don't need to see it in the movies. I don't need to see this guy spend 20 minutes on his hair and his vests and his shoes, his creepers, and spend all that time with her family, with her dad, and then not get the girl. That's way too depressing. What? His name is Blaine? That's a major appliance. That's not a name. What are his qualifications other than he's in the 80s version, good looking, and he drives a nice car? What's the other advantage that this guy has? What has she seen him helping puppies? No. It's the equivalent. It's the equivalent of a guy falling in love with a girl just because of the way she looks. And how long is that going to last? 10 seconds. I know pretty girls that have gotten married to guys who were only into their looks. Marriage lasted a year. It's what's inside that counts. And God, watching the movie, doesn't just Ducky love her? He loves everything about her. And she rejects him for this other guy. What were you thinking, John? Were you sending us a life lesson, Mr. Hughes? Because you know what? I learned that lesson in real life. I didn't need to pay $3.75 at the bargain matinee to see it on the big screen. But thank you. It's still a good movie. It's still eons ahead of a lot of the crap that came out in the 80s. It truly is. But it's a downer. But it's okay, because the same year, it was tempered with Ferris Bueller's Day Off. A cartoon, candy-colored look at what it's like to get the upper hand every time. You know, Ferris, who didn't want to be Ferris Bueller? Who didn't watch that movie and just, God, look at what he packed into a day off? I stay home from school sick and I watch The Price is Right. I don't do anything that Ferris got to do. I wasn't that clever. I wasn't that hip. And I had friends with cars who ditched school, who would take me anywhere. I had a friend named Joe. I've mentioned him in a couple other podcasts. Joe ditched school a lot. I don't think for his senior year, Joe went 5 days to school. But here's the thing. And I yelled at Joe for this. He used to get up in the morning, 7 a.m., get dressed, go out to his books, and then drive to Cerritos Mall and sleep in his truck. I said, what's the point of ditching school if you can't sleep in? Well, I gotta pretend to ditch for my father. I have to go out. I'm like, dude, wouldn't it be easier just to go to school? He didn't like my logic, but I was his friend, so he had to listen to it. But God, he drove one of those lowered trucks. Remember they were popular for 10 seconds where you got a truck, you lowered it all the way to the ground and put a Blaupunk a stereo system in it, and boom, 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 boom. I rode around in that. And it was fun because it was a nice truck. Although every time we went over a speed bump, the drive shaft scraped. So I just knew one day the whole thing was going to fall out. He had a Blaupunk stereo that was removable. Remember, the whole stereo came with you? And the windows of that truck were so tinted that you couldn't roll them up in the daytime. So in the winter, we would drive around in 50 degrees with the windows down, freezing our butts off. I said, Joe, this is too much to be cool. There's too much going on here to want to participate in being this cool. I digress. Sorry about that. But that's why you tune in, right? But no, Ferris Bueller's a fantastic movie. Ferris Bueller's, the movie's so good, it's hard to watch anything that the actors do after that and not see them as either Ferris or Cameron or Cameron Fry or Jeannie the sister. And you know what? Isn't the greatest thing to come out of the 80s that the actors who played Ferris Bueller's parents actually got married? God, doesn't that make you just glow that what's on the screen is real? Those two people love each other. God, if only they were just as clueless in real life as they are in the movie. But they're not, right? But how cool is that? And not in a Gigli, Jennifer Lopez, Ben Affleck way, but in a real, they're a real couple way. Ferris Bueller's parents are a real couple. That's cool. And what a great movie. We used to joke that my friend David was Cameron because he slept just like that in a tomb, and he answered the phone every time hello. They called Dave, doot, 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 ring, ring, Dave, hello. Dave, you all right? Yeah, just got up. It's 3 p.m. I know. Dave, you all right? Dave, are you Cameron Fry? We know you are. You're Cameron Fry, right? Just don't push the car out the back of the glass, right? But yeah, Ferris Bueller's fantastic, and it's great because he talks to the screen, and they didn't do a lot of those movies back then, a lot of narrated movies. There were here and there, but Ferris Bueller was the first big teen movie where he was telling you how to have that kind of day off, and that's cool. And he looked cool. He's a sausage king of Chicago. He's Abe Froman. What a quotable movie. And when we saw it at that sneak preview, the minute the valet drivers jumped the car off that hill and it plays the Star Wars theme, everybody looked at me like, hey, Jeff, I know it's the Star Wars theme. Can you let me watch the movie? Yes, it's the Star Wars theme. Can we watch the movie? Yes. Fantastic. And Jeffrey Jones, man, owns the screen. He's so good. Him and Edie McClurg destroy that script. They make it, I'm sure on paper it was great, but they just own it. They are those. He is Ed Rooney. You can't look at Jeffrey Jones in other movies, and he did classic. He's the emperor in Mozart. He's the dad in Beetlejuice. But if you look at Jeffrey Jones, he's Ed Rooney. He's also the Dark Overlord in Howard the Duck. But he's always Ed Rooney. And Edie McClurg just defined the secretary role in that movie. When she's pulling pencils out of her hat and does that monologue about the dweebs, the jocks, and the sluts, they think he's a righteous dude. Everything in Ferris Bueller is quotable. And isn't that what I've been saying about all these John Hughes movies? This guy knows how, even more than Mike Myers. Now, Mike Myers knows how to write catchphrases. Oh, yeah, groovy, baby. But John Hughes, the most prolific slang writer of all time. I'm going to just say that. Every one of his movies contains at least 30 or 40 unbelievably mega quoted lines that become staples of your language, of your vernacular. That's just what my whole generation spoke in Hughes. Let that sink in. We spoke John Hughes. We speak your name. But yeah, Ferris Bueller's what a great movie. I can watch it again and again and again. And isn't it even great when he comes out after the credits? You're still here. The movie's over. Go home. Brilliant. And for me, a guy who always stays past the credits, loves when you get a little thanks for staying. Because, the people who made the movie deserve for you to be there when their name goes by. I know I would. I would appreciate that if you stayed to see my name as the electrician, gaffer, best boy, location scout, whatever. I'd rather see it as writer or characters created by. But you never know. Take what you can get. I've never had a credit in a feature film. Background artists don't get that. And guys who make the maggots for License to Kill don't get that. But John Hughes, man, what a run. 86, we had Ferris Bueller and Pretty in Pink. Now, by this time, I've become a Back to the Future nut. So in 1987, when Some Kind of Wonderful came out, that I was going to the theater to see it. Leah Thompson, are you kidding? Leah Thompson, Eric Stoltz, who was the original Marty McFly, and they're going to romance each other. Wait a minute, this is a little weird. Weren't they also in The Wildlife? Yes, they were. Mention Wildlife to your friends. They don't even know what you're talking about. Go, there's a pseudo sequel to Fast Times at Ridgemont High? No, there isn't. There is. It's called The Wildlife, and it stars Wyatt from Weird Science. It does? Yeah, but we're not talking about that today. Fine, Jeff. Can you get to the topic? Yes, we'll get to the topic. Some Kind of Wonderful, which is the same exact movie as Pretty in Pink, with the genders reversed. Now, Eric Stoltz is the guy from the wrong side of the tracks, and Leah Thompson's the pretty girl who's rich and gets whatever she wants. But did John Hughes learn a lesson from Pretty in Pink? Or was he just trying to mix things up when at the end, Leah Thompson rejects Eric Stoltz and says, you need to be with the person who's loved you all along, Mary Stuart Masterson. And isn't that more satisfying? When she says, I'd rather be alone for the right reasons than with someone for the wrong, Leah Thompson says. Wouldn't it have been great if Blaine had said that and sent her off, Molly Ringwald off to go get Ducky and push, can you imagine it had been like Back to the Future when Ducky's about to kiss Christy Swanson and he goes, excuse me. And Molly Ringwald gets up and pushes Christy Swanson away and just plants one on him. God, that would have been great. But that's how Some Kind of Wonderful ends, with Leah Thompson saying you need to go and get the girl who really loves you. Not just superficially, but the one who loves you for all that you are and not what you can give or provide. It's a better message. It's still, even though it's got Leah Thompson in it and Elias Koteas just tears up the screen as the skinhead, but it's not one of my favorites. Because it's just a retread of Pretty in Pink, which is not one of my favorites. And even if you swap genders, the story is still the same. It's still wrong side of the tracks and long. Now, the ending is better. But Some Kind of Wonderful, it's not my favorite. And when you find out that Howard Deutsch, who directed it, ended up marrying Leah Thompson, you're like, well, maybe I could have directed it. Married Leah Thompson. The mom from Back to the Future. I was in love with Leah Thompson in that time. Had posters of her on the wall from both Some Kind of Wonderful and Casual Sex. And, well, she's not really on a Back to the Future poster, although I had some poster concepts that I got at the conventions that I hung on the wall that actually have her on it. But Some Kind of Wonderful is good. And then, this is where John Hughes takes a turn. And for those of us who idolized him, we weren't happy because John Hughes was growing up and he was forcing his movie-going audience to grow up with him. So when he released Planes, Trains, and Automobiles and She's Having a Baby, we saw, wait a minute, these aren't high school movies. This is about growing up and about adults. Wait a minute, where's John Hughes? These are John Hughes? So when these movies first came out, I didn't care for them at all. Now, I love Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. And I liked it the first time I saw it because Steve Martin and John Candy are comic geniuses in the movie. And they're supported by a fantastic supporting cast. But it was a bitter pill because it wasn't what we were used to. This is the guy that gave us Breakfast Club. And now it's about a guy getting home to his family for Thanksgiving. And what's this other one? Kevin Bacon's wife is going to have a baby? Are you saying we have to grow up, Mr. Hughes? Because in 1987, I was only 16, and I'm not ready for this. I may be Kevin Bacon strapped to the rocket chair, racing towards the brick wall, because I'm not ready to grow up. And these movies only got good in hindsight. Now, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles was always good. But in hindsight, it got great. Because the older you get, the funnier it is because you experience this in life. Up until high school, you only experience high school. So the high school movies are what appeals to you. So Planes, Trains, and Automobiles was the first adult John Hughes movie that I enjoyed because of the stars. John Candy, Steve Martin. You can't get better than that as far as comedy goes. They're geniuses in the movie. And it's weird because I know a lot of people, really close friends of mine, who don't like this movie. And I'm not sure why, because a lot of the modern day movies follow this template. And the template is simply the main character is a fussy, persnickety kind of guy, and he has a complete series of awful things happen to him over a short period of time, and he emerges a better person because he learns to cope with anything that life can throw at him, and he's no longer so tightly wound. Did I not just describe every Ben Stiller movie ever made? Like, that's what that guy's made a living playing. And you know what? I don't care for it when Ben Stiller does it. Like, I know that movie, Meet the Parents, which, again, I've just described the whole movie. He's a normal guy. He's kind of tightly wound, and a series of really horrible things happen to him, and he has to somehow dig through them. And the difference in that, in Meet the Parents, is that he's a little nicer guy, so you're a little more sympathetic when these things happen to him. But it just comes across as most modern movies are. It's cruel. A lot of modern movies are cruel. And Planes, Trains, and Automobiles doesn't have that because Steve Martin's character, Neil Page, even though he's tightly wound, John Candy's character, Del Griffith, is just sort of a happy-go-lucky guy who's floating through life. And in the beginning, he's a bore. Like he doesn't have any man. He's ill-mannered. He's gross. He knows the lowest people in society. And it's not until the end when it's revealed that, spoiler alert, his wife is dead and that he's basically homeless, that you think, well, he's not just a bore. He's this guy who sees every opportunity as another opportunity. Every encounter is just an opportunity, and who knows where life is going to take you. And isn't that the message that Neil gets from him, is that this guy that he thought was such a lout, suddenly he sees with different eyes. Now, I'll say the movie's perfect. It does have one little thing that bothers me, but it's just a director's choice. And that's at the end when Steve Martin is on the L train going home. And he's remembering all the moments he had with Del. They, instead of just letting Steve Martin play the scene and act the crap out of it, they have to show you the flashbacks. I get that. That's for the dummies in the audience. I think from a film point of view, the movie would play better if it was just Steve Martin remembering. And then when he gets on the train and goes back the other direction, it would be more of a reveal when he walks in the station and he goes, Del, what are you doing here? And he goes, Marie died. I have nowhere to go. And I love the moment where they're walking down the street carrying Del's trunk, which has been a thorn in Neil's side the whole movie. And there they are carrying it to Paul Young singing every time you go. It's such a good Thanksgiving movie. You know, most Thanksgiving movies, if you try to watch them, if you try to come up with a Thanksgiving movie that you're going to watch on the holiday with your family, because remember, I'm not a football guy. I'm not going to sit and watch football all day. It has no interest to me. The only way football would be interesting to me is if they did picture-in-picture and you could watch the cheerleaders the whole time, because then it would at least duplicate my high school life. But they don't do that. They show the cheerleaders for a second, usually with stats over the top of their head, superimposed. I don't care. I don't care about football. But if you're trying to find a Thanksgiving movie to watch with your family, you're going to come across the same problem every time. Every Thanksgiving movie is about complete dysfunctional families who hate each other for an hour and a half and then sit down for turkey and suddenly think everybody's great. I don't like those movies. That's uncomfortable. My own family can sometimes be a pain in the rear end. Why do I want to sit cinematically for an hour and a half with that kind of people? No, thank you. But instead, in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, we're treated to Neil Page, I got their names together. Neil Page, who's just trying to get home to his family for Christmas. For Thanksgiving. Sorry, my son is getting a drink out of the fridge and I'm distracted. Anyways, he's trying to get home for Thanksgiving, and there's all these obstacles. So he has to glom on to this guy, Del Griffith, who, again, just sort of floats through life and looks at every moment as, what kind of fun can I get out of this? And John Candy plays that to the hilt. And Steve Martin, building on what he did in Roxanne, is transitioning to a different kind of comedic actor. He's no longer going to be the wild and crazy guy who we love, but it ran its course. And instead, he's doing this understated, fussy man who we're not quite sure that we like. And then we find at the end, or we find in the drinking scene, where they're in the hotel and they're drinking the little bottles of liquor, that these two have so much in common as far as the human condition, and that maybe we're not so different. And out of all the movies you've seen, watch the scene in the hotel, the motel, where they're drinking the liquor, and tell me if it doesn't feel real. It doesn't look like two actors, John Hughes yells action, and then they start giggling and pretending to be drunk and having that moment of you just can't stop laughing and everything's funny. That scene just feels so real, like they had been doing that for an hour and they just managed to catch that singular moment of reality. When John Candy goes, potato chips, they're everywhere! Or they're talking about the car melting, and he goes, I'm afraid if I look at my butt, I'm going to have griddle marks. Like, that's so real to me. As you can imagine, as you can see, I really like this movie. I've seen it a lot. I burned through the John Hughes high school movies during my high school time, and I still watch them. But as I get older, I appreciate Planes, Trains, and Automobiles more and more because I'm a guy who works a lot, and I treasure the time I spend with my family. And isn't it funny when Neil misses the Thanksgiving pageant, which, schools don't really have, but he tells Del, and Del says, oh, that's the golden stuff. That doesn't come back. Like, he doesn't have any idea that he's making it completely worse. But it's a really good movie. And the scene where they're selling the shower curtain rings, because that's where Del works, shower curtain ring division, to all the girls as earrings. This is a Walter Cronkite moon ring. It's filled with helium, so it's very light. And he goes, these make you look older. You could pass for 15, no problem. And they just hand their money over. That's a fun scene of how do you get two broke characters back on track. And it is the perfect holiday movie to watch. And maybe when Planes, Trains, and Automobiles came out, and regardless of its box office, the fact that it gels so well must have ignited something in Mr. Hughes, because he would start to write movies for older people. But not exclude young people, because I'm looking at his IMDb page, and after Planes, Trains, and Automobiles came She's Having a Baby. Again, I was never really a fan of that movie, and I'll be honest, and I know this is blasphemy for anybody who grew up in the 80s. I was never a Kevin Bacon fan. I never got Footloose. Oh, I know, right? I never got Footloose. And there's a reason. Like, it's not just because I'm a jerk, but I never got into pop music until late in the 80s. I was not a music guy. As you can tell by my podcast, I'm a movie guy. I relate everything to the movies. It wasn't until my first hardcore fake relationship girl breakup that I got into music. And those that know me know that I got into the Smiths. Like, I looked for the most depressing music I could find. She doesn't love me anymore, so find me the music that will spiral down into a descent into dark madness. The Smiths? Perfect. They got a song about dying while you're on a date. There is a light that never goes out. Sign me up. So, yeah. I never got Footloose. How did I relate that to Footloose? I don't know. What I'm saying is I never got into music. So I didn't get Footloose. The only 80s music with 80s movie with music in it that I got into was Breakin'. And you know what? I saw Breakin' and Beat Street on a double feature. Didn't care for Beat Street. It's got too much music. But, oh my God, Breakin' has so much girls in shiny spandex that how can you not love it? I watch Breakin' all the time. There's no stopping us. No stopping. I mean, oh my God. Breakin'. Boogaloo Shrimp. Doesn't make me hip at all. I could never breakdance. But those were my concessions to movies that had music in them. And because of my taste, I didn't care for She's Having a Baby. Because I don't really care for Mr. Bacon. And for that matter, I don't care for Elizabeth McGovern. Like, I can't think of a single movie she's in that I want to watch, And that's just a taste thing. That's just one. She's just one of those stars that's not on my radar. The funniest thing in She's Having a Baby is Alec Baldwin. And it has some funny moments. I think the lawnmower Busby Berkeley scene is fun, but overall it's not my thing. And it was weird because in our group of friends growing up in the 80s, my friend John really latched onto this movie for some reason. Like, I could just imagine him with a snifter of brandy that he's swirling, watching She's Having a Baby. You guys go ahead and watch 16 Candles again. I'm going to watch She's Having a Baby. Why, John? You're not having a baby? Well, I'm not having a baby, but I might have it. Oh, you're going to have a baby? When? Soon? Actually, he did. To close out the 80s, by 90 or 91, John had a baby. So maybe he was watching it to bone up. And is it any weird coincidence that John named his baby Jeffrey? What does that mean? Am I digressing too far into the rabbit hole? My best friend in the 80s had a baby and named it Jeffrey? That's weird. Is it weird? Am I being overly cautious? That kid's in his 20s now. Oh my God. Anyways. The next John Hughes movie he did was The Great Outdoors. John Candy, Dan Aykroyd. It's a funny movie. Not one of my favorites. It's not, it's not one of those that's beloved. It's a cute movie. It's fun. It's got a bear in it. It has a line that Dan Aykroyd says to John Candy that I actually use a lot, where he says, "Good time? You wouldn't know a good time if it fell out of the sky, landed on your face, and started to wiggle." You know what? That's a good line. Thank you, Mr. Hughes, for that line. I use that line a lot in life. But, the movie's okay. It's weird because Great Outdoors is like a companion piece to Summer Rental, another movie where John Candy goes on vacation. That guy going on vacation as often as Clark Griswold. What's up with that? Anyways. His next film, John Hughes' next film, and I'm going to burn through the ones that I don't really have an affinity for, so sorry, but I do really like the next one, Uncle Buck. I've seen Uncle Buck a lot. Uncle Buck, just for whatever reason, and I'm sure it's John Candy. It just sort of resonated, and I watched it a lot with when it came on video. We watched it a lot. My girlfriend loved this movie, so we watched it a lot, and it's the first time you see Macaulay Culkin. And you know what? say what you want about how the kid grew up. In Uncle Buck and in Home Alone, which I'm going to get to in a minute, he's very good. Macaulay Culkin's comic timing, and I don't think it's editing. Like, a lot of kids' performances are created in the editing room. But in Uncle Buck, Macaulay Culkin's comedic timing is fantastic. It's very funny. Plus, it's got Amy Madigan in it, which I really like. When she goes, "Look, Buck, I want to hear the pitter-patter of little feet," and he goes, "Look, I'll get you some mice and a piece of sheet metal." It's funny stuff. It's got the scene with the woman at the school with the mole. I'm Buck Melanoma, Molly Russell's wart. And it's funny stuff. And it comes out of just fun situations. But you know what? As a guy with kids, now that I watch it, I'm a little terrified. Because the mom is really, the mom in the movie, she's really uptight. And she does not want to leave her kids in Buck's care. And you know what? I get it. I wouldn't leave my kid with Uncle Buck either. The guy knows nothing about kids. Now, he does pull it all together in the end. You know, he has a great line where he's taking the kids to school and he's like, "Is it the hat? A lot of people hate this hat." My friend Steve used to say that line all the time. I used to love that line when he always wore a hat and he goes, "Is it the hat? A lot of people hate this hat." That's a funny line. Funny. Uncle Buck's a funny movie. The TV show they made out of it, starring what, Kevin Meaney? Not so funny. But then once Family Ties and Cheers ran its course, I sort of gave up on sitcoms. I don't like shows with laugh track. I like live theater. If I want to hear people laugh, I'll go see a live production. Why are they laughing on the TV? That's weird. That will always be weird. Like Andy Kaufman. Those people are dead. The people who laughed on that recording are dead. You know? The worst Andy Kaufman impression ever I just did. I did a bad impression of Jim Carrey doing Andy Kaufman impression. But after Uncle Buck, a really classic movie, Christmas Vacation. I don't think I've ever met anyone who doesn't like Christmas Vacation. And if you're listening to this and you've never seen it or you don't like it, you need to go watch it again. It's a really good movie, a really sentimental movie about spending Christmas with your family, which, hey, in Clark's mind's eye and in our mind's eye, it's always going to be perfect. But it never is it? No, it isn't. It's always hell. We have Christmas at our house. We have relatives that come over. I don't even talk to them because they come over and they immediately fall asleep on the couch. They sleep the whole holiday. That's weird. That's really weird. You know, I got kids, so my friends who don't have kids like to come over and see the kids on Christmas. And I love sharing that. But, the perfect Currier and Ives Christmas we picture, it never works out that way. And Christmas Vacation is just cinematic proof that it doesn't work out that way. And it's the return of Uncle Eddie in the movie. Shitter's full. I mean, that's a great line. There's a lot of really good lines in Christmas Vacation. And it does echo the first film more than the awful European Vacation. You know, instead of Wally World being closed, it's no Christmas bonus. So Eddie kidnaps the boss. And it has a lot of great moments. And I think my favorite moment in the movie, and this just means I'm a schmuck, I'm a schmaltzy schmuck who uses Yiddish, is that I like the scene where Clark gets trapped in the attic. And he has to, put on the pink bathrobe and the gloves because he's freezing. And he starts up the 8mm projector. And we're 16, it doesn't matter. He watches old movies from Christmas past. And they play sentimental music. And it's very touching because you get a sense of, even more so, who Clark Griswold is. And that he's this guy who just wants the best for his family. And in this movie, it's a pool. He wants a pool. Of course, we still get the scene of the hot chick swimming in the pool who works at the lingerie counter. And it's all very funny. It looks as if John Hughes sat down with the original Vacation and said, how do we make Christmas Vacation the same beats without going anywhere? And for the most part, they got it right. And who doesn't love that Audrey and Rusty keep changing. They're different in every movie. They're even different ages in every movie. Like, nothing makes sense. And Juliette Lewis, great. The guy from Big Bang Theory's good. You'll be shocked to find out that I've never watched an episode of that show. I don't get that. Again, sitcom with a laugh track, not my thing. But I do love Christmas Vacation, and I do watch it a lot. It's one of our Christmas staples around here. And that would bring us to the other Christmas staple. Are you ready for it? The divisive movie that will send people screaming. I really like Home Alone. Home Alone to me is a guilty pleasure. Now, when it came out, I wasn't going to see that crap because it made a lot of money. And I'm always suspect when movies that I don't get make a lot of money. And I wasn't going to see it. But you know what? When I finally watched it, it's very good. And you know what it is? It's, again, Macaulay Culkin's comic timing is fantastic in it. Gosh, what kid hasn't fantasized about being the hero and saving the day? And he gets to act it all out, you know? And yes, it has schmaltz in it. The stuff with the neighbor and him being, you know, he's going to tell his much older neighbor how to live his life. Like, you know, but I forgive all that because I really do like the goofy story of it. And again, Culkin is very engaging in the movie. Now, after this, I will never watch him in a movie. I've seen some of his films. After this, it ends with him. I mildly enjoy part 2, but we'll get to that. But Home Alone's a very good movie. And you know what? It has a lot to do also with Catherine O'Hara, who's the mom. And I adored Catherine O'Hara from SCTV and Beetlejuice. And then you get John Candy as the leader of the polka band. You know, we had a great hit, Polka, Polka, Polka. It was a big hit in Sheboygan. You know, I love all that talk, man. That makes me scream. But it's a cute movie and has a great message about family and putting up with your, you know, idiot uncle. Look what you did, you little jerk. You are what the French call les incompetents. Cheese pizza? Yeah, we got a cheese pizza, but someone's going to have to barf it up because it's all gone. You know, who hasn't wanted to kill their older brother? Who hasn't wanted to kill their uncle? You know, who hasn't felt, at least for a moment, that everybody's out to get you? We've all felt that way. Home Alone just solidifies it and gives you some of that wish fulfillment. It's not a great movie. It's not an epic, but for a movie that Hughes wrote very quickly and handed over to Chris Columbus. You know, Chris Columbus had floundered. After Chris Columbus hit it big with Adventures in Babysitting, he was able to do anything he wanted. And, Chris Columbus wrote Goonies and Gremlins. This guy was young Sherlock Holmes. I mean, that's a hell of a run. And then Adventures in Babysitting. And then after that, he did a movie called Heartbreak Hotel. Now, I actually saw Heartbreak Hotel where these kids kidnap Elvis. It's a silly, silly movie that it has them hiring an overweight woman to be the ghost of Elvis's mother. Like, it's really creepy. But David Keith does a pretty decent Elvis. And it's not a bad movie, but I think it made about 35 cents at the box office. So Chris Columbus had been delegated and knocked down to second unit on Christmas Vacation. And he told John Hughes, if you don't get me off this movie, I'm going to kill Chevy Chase. Because I guess there were some issues with Chevy. And you know Chevy's reputation is not always the most sparkling. But Hughes gave him this movie. And oh my God, mega hit. Mega hit. Put Chris Columbus back in the game in a huge way. Wrote his ticket for the guy that would eventually direct Harry Potter, for goodness sake. But, Home Alone, you know. And I know that, if you've ever seen Dogma, Kevin Smith's religious movie, they really slam Home Alone. You know, when Selma Hayek is the muse responsible for all. But not the movie with the kid with the hands and the burglar. Like, it's, you know, okay, whatever. I understand that it's schlock, but it's schlock that I enjoy, you know. My wife enjoys Taco Bell, even though she knows it's bad for you and that it's crud. Me, won't touch the stuff. Anywho, got to burn through these because this episode's getting to be an epic. But we're talking about John Hughes, right? Career Opportunities, another tiny movie, forever known as, that movie about Target. a cute movie. It's basically teenage version of Home Alone. Have you seen it? I've got it. I've watched it with my kids. Jennifer Connelly riding a quarter-operated horse, worth the price of admission. Oh, my God. That's the girl from Labyrinth. Hasn't she grown up? Then he would follow it up with Dutch, never saw it. Curly Sue, never saw it. Beethoven, he wrote Beethoven. And what's great is if you listen to my other episode, Infamous, that I'm in the Beethoven sequel for about half a second. But I liked Beethoven because stars Charles Grodin, and I really like Charles Grodin, and I would see almost any movie that Charles Grodin is in, even though now he's retired. He comes back occasionally. But it's one of those, it's a movie about a dog. What are you going to do? This is John Hughes continuing his film journey, and he briefly dipped into more adult fare with She's Having a Baby and Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. And suddenly he goes the other direction and starts making movies for children. Dutch, Curly Sue, Home Alone, Beethoven, Home Alone 2. These are all movies for kids. And I think maybe as we entered the early 90s, John Hughes was looking to reinvent himself, and God bless him that he kept working, because if you had made 16 Candles, Breakfast Club, Pretty in Pink, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Some Kind of Wonderful, all in a row, you wouldn't have to do anything else the rest of your life. That's writing the rules for everybody else to sit down and follow. That's what John Hughes did. So if he comes out and does Home Alone 2, which is schlock, even though it's got Tim Curry in it, and if you don't love Tim Curry, stop listening now. Tim Curry's fantastic in everything he's in, from Rocky Horror to Clue to Red October. Love Tim Curry. He's it. He's Pennywise. But Hughes continues with Dennis the Menace, Beethoven Second, Baby's Day Out, Miracle on 34th Street, 101 Dalmatians, Flubber, Home Alone 3. Wow. That's a huge run of really popular movies that you probably, most people who are listening don't even know John Hughes was involved in those. And that's okay, because they're not his style. He's rewriting the rules for himself. That's amazing. What a run. What a run. He did a film in 1998 called Reach the Rock. Now, I've actually seen this movie. This was an attempt at trying to go home again. It's a small town, kid getting into trouble. It's a lot like Career Opportunities, but it's a little darker. Reach the Rock is a metaphor for getting out of town. Like if you could reach the rock, you'd just get out of town. You'd get farther away. It's not good, but it's by John Hughes, so it's still better than a lot of crud. And a funny thing about John Hughes is that a lot of the stuff that he's writing, he's not even taking credit for. He's crediting it to somebody named Edmond Dantes, which is the main character in The Count of Monte Cristo, which the 2001 Count of Monte Cristo movie is in my top 10 favorite movies of all time. How bizarre is that? So he's not even taking credit, and that's why you don't even know he did this stuff. Yeah, Beethoven's 3, straight to video. Just Visiting. He wrote the screenplay to Just Visiting. Anybody ever seen this movie? This is a remake of a French movie where Jean Reno plays a time traveler, a knight, and his serf who comes to modern-day New York to romance Christina Applegate. And you know what? When you see the trailer and the poster, it looks terrible. But this movie is actually very good. I actually remember really enjoying this movie. So I'm going to have to revisit this one just so that I can get a little more flavor on it. Only because it's John Hughes. And again, even bad John Hughes is better than most schlock. I keep saying the same thing. And then he did Beethoven's 4th, Home Alone 4, really? Beethoven's 5th? There are 5 Beethovens? He didn't write them, though. He's just getting credit for creating the characters. Did you know he wrote Maid in Manhattan? The Jennifer Lopez hotel maid movie with Ray Fiennes. And then last thing he did was he came up with the story for Drill Bit Taylor, which is a really lame Owen Wilson movie about a guy who helps kids who are bullied. I've never seen it. I have no desire. I'm not an Owen Wilson fan. Again, I'll have to make that list of all the actors that I don't get. Owen Wilson's up on that list with Ben Stiller and a bunch of others. I won't go into it because I'll spiral, and this episode's already too long as it is. But let's recap, shall we? Let's just talk a little bit because John Hughes, that's who we're talking about. He died August 6th, 2009. He had a heart attack in Manhattan and collapsed on the street. And I can only imagine what it would have been like for the poor people who ran to his aid and helped him, and they probably didn't even know who he was. And what they should have known was that, the guy having the heart attack and the guy that's soon to leave us influenced an entire generation. John Hughes was, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, he was the voice of our generation. He gave us the slang to use. He gave us the lines, the movie lines that we use in our lives every day, and we've done since those movies came out. They were instant classics. And when you look back at the movies that came out in the 80s, it seems like they were all classics, but they weren't. There's a lot of movies that didn't make it past initial release and didn't make it past a couple of weeks in the video store. But John Hughes movies, not only did they last, they rose to the top. And every teenager discovers them and thinks, like every teenager who discovers the Beatles, like, I'm the only one who's dug this deep and found this amazing stuff. But we all did. We all recognized in 16 Candles a movie that was much better than it should have been. And Breakfast Club is the quintessential 80s movie. All the archetypes get together and air out their differences and try to find common ground. I loved Breakfast Club so much that we had cable and we didn't have the pay channels. We only had basic cable. But I did that thing where you go to the awful cable channel you can't get and it's scrambled, but you can hear the audio. And you'll always hear this story because it's always guys who are trying to look at pornography because they can hear the woman squealing or whatever it is, and you're trying to figure out what it is. That wasn't me. I never did that. I never had that rite of passage. But I did videotape Breakfast Club in a scrambled form so that I could put it on while I was doing model kits and listen to the dialogue. Because you can paint a picture in your mind with Breakfast Club just with the dialogue. Because it's so crisp and so good and so knowing. And I don't know if listening to a scrambled version of Breakfast Club makes me a genius or the saddest kid in the 80s. It's probably somewhere in the middle. But before I got older, before other movies mattered, there was Breakfast Club. And I don't know anybody who grew up in my time who didn't just idolize this movie and not only want to watch it, but want to meet those people and hang out with them. All of them. And that's what we did, man. We metaphorically found our friends who reminded us of those. I was Farmer Ted. I'm not ashamed to admit it. My friend Terry was Emilio Estevez. I knew a lot of guys who could have been Bender. Eric comes to mind. Eric Hardy comes to mind. He was the bad boy with the army jacket. What a great movie and what a great time. And I'm not a drinking man. I never have been. I mean, if you're listening to the show, you know that. But if there was let's say the 80s drink is Jolt. Remember Jolt? And if I could hold up my Jolt and pour a little out for John Hughes, I would. Because I wish I could have met him and said, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hughes, for writing it down. and putting it out there for all of us. And oh man, what great movies! Just makes me want to sit and watch them right now. Like I want to end this podcast and just veg out watching all the John Hughes movies. And I've collected most of them on DVD because they mean that much to me. So, well, hey, look at the time. We've gone way over what we should have gone just talking about all these great movies. This is what happens when I don't have a singular movie to talk about. And instead I'm talking about an entire spectrum of films. But they're great. Listen, this is 91 Reasons. I'm Jeff Tucker. I'm the voice that you hear. We have a Facebook page. And I'd love it if you would go on Facebook, find it. Just type in either hashtag 91 Reasons or just 91 Reasons, and it should come up. You'll see the logo. Like the page and join in because I'm always putting up the supplemental materials to the show, the stuff that you can't see through the podcast. Like just last night, I put up the Family Ties tickets I talked about in the Sneaks episode because I finally found them. But there they are, and we're always putting up stuff that relates to this. And if you could like that, and then just drop me a message. What's your favorite John Hughes movie? Let's have a discussion about it because everybody's got their favorite. Maybe your favorite's Curly Sue, and I've never seen it. And maybe you'll be so passionate about it that I'll want to pick this crap fest up and watch it. Or Dutch. I don't know. Isn't Curly Sue only relevant because it was Steve Carell's film debut? Probably. I don't know. Anyways, listen, you can go on iTunes and leave us a review. We just got a fantastic review from a guy who's listening named Jeremy. Thank you, Jeremy, for your fantastic review. We really love that. It's nice to know that somebody is out there listening and appreciating it because I'm sitting here talking to nobody. But in reality, in my mind's eye, I'm talking to you. Yes, you. Keep your eyes on the road. You'll hit that old lady. You ever see the old lady in The Rock? Go watch The Rock during the car chase and look at the old lady. It's so obvious a stunt person in an old lady costume. Hey, what are we talking about? It's 91 Reasons. It's the place where all pop culture goes to be dissected and looked at, revered, loved, and hated. So I will leave you with the immortal words of John Hughes via Ferris Bueller. Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
Thanks for listening to 91 Reasons. Please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. Find us on Facebook. Is anyone even still listening?
You're still listening? The podcast is over. Go home. Go. Go home.